How are you? It's been a while.
It has been. It's been a few weeks.
Almost a month, I think,
Really?
since we've last talked. Yeah.
Oh.
Do you have anything that we want to especially talk about today? Was not on the emails that we traded.
Nothing that was not on those emails. Although I have to say, my context memory right now for what we talking about is pretty. Like flying back yesterday from Orlando, and then the scheduling ridiculousness of this morning has like erased my context memory. I'm sure it will all come back to me, but I don't have my normal set of organized notes about things I want to mention. So
Okay. Is Orlando something you want to talk about?
I don't know, maybe briefly.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's going to end up on the cutting room floor, but probably not.
Well, that depends. I mean, we never know what's going to be interesting and what's not going to be interesting. I have no idea.
This is true.
I have hopes and dreams.
Okay, we should do that then. Hour and a half on Tom's hopes and dreams. Can we do that? How much time do you think we could fill with Tom's hopes and dreams?
I think that would be a solid 2 to 3 minutes.
You remember your dreams?
In general, I do. Yeah, I think for a short time right after you wake up, they're kind of fresh in my memory, but then they fall out again.
Right. You ever had a dream where you know that you're dreaming?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Really?
Oh yeah,
all the time?
Yeah,
all the time you're having a dream, and in the middle of the dream you realize, oh, this is a dream.
I've had that happen fairly often. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so what do you do with that opportunity?
Sometimes it wakes me up when I become aware that I'm dreaming, and then I'm awake again. Sometimes I kind of enjoy it and go along with the ride.
You don't impose any sort of additional control on the narrative of the dream once you realize what you're in?
I don't know if I can exercise that much control. I don't think I can do lucid dreaming, if that's what you're talking about.
So I don't quite know what lucid dreaming is. I've heard the term before, and there's a cool book by Carlos Castaneda, The Art of Dreaming, that I read years ago. But I remember as a kid when I would have dreams, and this doesn't happen to me anymore, and I would realize that it's a dream. I would say, oh my gosh, it's a dream. And then I would sort of be overwhelmed with like, oh, it's a dream, therefore I can do anything, right? So I would like fly around a little bit.
Okay.
And then I would be like, oh my gosh, because like when else are you going to be able to fly around, right? And then I would say, oh, I should see if there's like a secret meaning I could like deduce from the dream. And then I would go and try and find a book and just open the book and see what the book said. And it was always in a script that I could not understand. It was like alien cuneiform writing.
Yeah.
And so that I would read, it felt very meaningful, but I couldn't articulate the English translation. So I would wake up. A lot of things in dreams are like that, right?
Yeah.
You describe them, and after you wake up, they're random, but they felt incredibly meaningful at the time.
Yeah, I often have the sensation that some idea I've come up with in my dream is just amazingly brilliant. And when I think back on it later in the day, I was like, oh, that's kind of lame, actually.
Exactly.
That really wasn't as exciting as I thought it was.
Right. Well, so what is lucid dreaming?
That's having, like you said, narrative control of what's happening in your dream, isn't it?
I guess. So the Carlos Castaneda business was one, you realize that you're dreaming, and then you start to take control of your dream. Yeah. And then the second half of the book, he starts to encounter other life forms that are in his dream space. So basically, it's a dimension of consciousness where you can interact with other beings in that dimension. And then apparently, at least in the book he wrote, and it was hard to tell what part he was claiming as fiction and what part he was claiming as nonfiction, because he's talking about finding this person who's teaching him how to do this. And then some of these beings in this dimension weren't of the most benevolent intent. And so he sort of got into a little scrape with them.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful. Got to be careful when you lucid dream.
That's true. Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis?
No, but my father did once. He described experience. Is this when your eyes are open, but you absolutely can't move your body because the rest of your body's still asleep?
Yes. In general, yes. There's like some sort of disconnect between what your brain is doing and what your body still thinks it's in sleep mode. So your body doesn't want to move around much when you're in deep sleep, so it kind of paralyzes itself.
Right.
But if there's some sort of disruption in your sleep and you become aware of your surroundings, you can be stuck in a kind of paralyzed state.
That's pretty cool.
The No Dumb Questions podcast did an episode about it recently, so it's been kind of in my mind lately because I've had that happen before, and I actually had it happen recently.
Really?
Like after that podcast episode came out, and I was like in the middle of sleep paralysis, I was thinking, "Oh, this is sleep paralysis. This is interesting because I just heard a podcast episode about this." So I wasn't that alarmed by it because I've had this happen to me before, but it was interesting nonetheless.
So you woke up, you were aware that you were awake, your eyes were open, and you couldn't move your body?
My eyes were not open, but I was basically frozen. And I was aware that I couldn't move anything.
Huh.
It usually happens when you're in unfamiliar surroundings. Like I was in a different bed than I was normally because I was traveling.
Right.
So
interesting.
But I was aware of it. I mean, if it's not something you're aware of, it can be quite a frightening experience.
Yeah. That's never happened to me. I do wake up on occasion where I've slept on one of my arms, and then the whole arm is like the blood has been cut off.
Yeah, that's different.
Actually, it's kind of funny. Like a couple of times I'll be sleeping on my stomach and both arms fall asleep. And then that's your body waking up saying, "Hey, your arms are going to fall off unless you wake up and give them some blood," right?
Yeah.
And so it's like a safety mechanism. So I'll wake up and everything from like my entire arms I can't move them. And so I'll sort of sit up in bed and then just shake around like a torso until the blood goes back into the fingers and stuff. That's kind of fun.
How can you sleep on your stomach? That's insane.
Yeah, so I don't frequently anymore because it's actually pretty bad for your neck. Unless you are face down, which it's hard to breathe if you're face down as in a pillow.
Yeah.
Then you have to turn your neck to one side or the other, and it messes up your neck alignment. So I don't do that. It's pretty rare for me anymore, but I do remember that happening, waking up and having no feeling in my extremities.
Yeah. I have a hard time just even sleeping on my side. I have to sleep flat on my back or else there's no other option for me.
Ergonomically, they say if you can handle it, that's the best that you can do. Is back.
Oh yeah,
back is best. Side, if you can handle it, and even then, you have to sort of make sure that you're not messing with your hip joints. Because what happens is that you go to sleep on your side, but then eventually with one leg on top of the other, right?
Yeah.
But you can't hold that position the whole night, and so your top leg will slide off typically, and that puts a strain on your hip flexors, and so you end up with like funky alignment issues. So a lot of people use they call it a sleep pillow, but like a leg pillow.
Yeah.
Put between you in order to prevent that from happening. But yeah, if you can handle sleeping on your back, then that's the way to go.
Or sleeping upside down with inversion boots. You ever done that?
Hold on. I need to get closer to the microphone because somebody just mentioned inversion boots. So, okay. I'm imagining like magnetized boots where you could strap them on and then like go to sleep like a bat. Is that what you're talking about?
That's basically it, but not magnetized. It's just I don't know. I've never done that, but I've seen it.
How would you handle the blood rushing to your head? That would be the big problem for me, man.
I don't think you're supposed to sleep like that, but there are contraptions where you can hang yourself upside down for whatever reason.
So, you know that I have chronic neck back sort of issues that I'm trying to work through with PT, and I've done that a couple times. There's it's not total quack pseudoscience. There's like an thing called an inversion table.
Right. That's what I was talking about, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am going to have to pause because my computer is telling me that I'm running low on disk space.
All right. Back up and running. We good on disk space? We're going to have to set a Patreon goal for listeners to help contribute to getting Pet a new computer.
All right, I should just break down and do it. Tom, I just had the weirdest experience as we were having that conversation. My body all of a sudden froze, and then I had this really lucid dream that my disk space was running out and that we had to stop recording and check our disk space and reconnect our USB cables, and then like a half a second later, it's like we're right back to normal. I don't know what happened there.
I have a recurring nightmare of Ped running out of disk space in the middle of a recording.
And you're frozen? You can't do anything about it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm constantly haunted by that.
That's what I should be for Halloween.
A Windows disk usage message.
That would be a highly specialized Halloween costume. I would just walk around with headphones and a microphone and a laptop with a disk space message. You're like, why is that frightening? I'm like, oh well, you just ask Tom, he'll know.
Yes. I always wake up screaming. All right. Shall we do some follow up?
Yeah, let's do some follow up.
Had a small correction from a listener on the Reddit, on the 2Bit Geek subreddit for my last episode.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I kind of mixed up in my mind viruses and bacteria.
Viruses and bacteria.
One is considered a form of life and the other is not.
Can I guess which is which?
Go ahead.
Because I really don't have any idea.
Yeah.
I'm thinking viruses are a form of life and bacteria are not.
It's the opposite.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting. I want what is the reason for that classification?
Because viruses yeah, what is the difference?
Well, Tom, it sounds like you really did your follow-up research on that one. Good correction.
Viruses don't have a cell structure.
Huh.
And they don't consume. Well, let me look at what the listener said.
Okay.
Here, I can just quote them directly.
All right.
Viruses aren't alive. Bacteria are alive because they're single-celled organisms. Viruses are pools of RNA contained in a protein shell called a capsid. They hook onto actual living organisms and inject them with the virus RNA that forces the cell to reproduce little virus capsids that go on to inject more cells. The virus contains nothing but RNA. It does not require energy and cannot reproduce by itself.
It does not require energy?
Mm.
Whoa, dude. That's interesting. Okay, so
when I was saying that the virus that wipes out humanity would still be a life in itself afterwards was technically incorrect.
yeah, so in this definition, which my armchair biologist understanding would say is the two qualifications for life are one, you have a DNA structure that's driving the whole thing, and that it is encapsulated within a cell structure.
Yeah, and that viruses do not have that.
Right, because they are malevolent RNA injectors.
Right, they have no cell structure and they don't have DNA. They just have RNA.
And they're encapsulated, what did you say, in a capsid?
A capsid, a protein shell is what
protein shell. So if we develop something that destroyed all capsids, then we could be free of all viruses?
I don't know.
I bet you no biologist has ever thought of this before.
Yeah. But I conflated in my mind the equally terrifying future apocalypse where bacteria start developing more drug resistant, and that's going to cause a lot of sadness in the world if we can't have, antibiotics is essential for life-saving surgeries and operations these days.
Yes.
And we kind of take it for granted that we have this ability to prevent bacterial infections. But when that goes away because of basically the evolution of bacteria is developing drug resistance,
right?
That's a kind of a medical apocalypse that's in our future.
Yes. This is a common mistake that people make when they get a bacterial infection and they get antibiotics, but they don't finish the course, right? Have you ever gotten a little bottle of erythromycin or whatever?
Right.
Or amoxicillin or whatever?
Definitely follow your doctor's instructions and don't take things into your own hands.
Right, because basically there's a problem here where if you take them for a few days, you feel better and you feel over it. You've given your own personal system enough ability to overcome the bacteria. But if you don't finish it off, if you don't kill those bacteria, what you're essentially doing is you're attempting to vaccinate that bacteria with the antibiotic. In other words, you're exposing the bacteria to just enough to where it might potentially mutate a resistance. It's like endless. If you only take the first few days, right? It's like these endless trials where the bacteria has all these different attempts to mutate, and usually it's not going to happen. But all it takes is a few times, and then it's the same thing we're always talking about, Tom. You have to do something for the greater good that doesn't benefit you.
Yes, exactly right.
Right.
Even if you feel better, keep taking the prescribed amount according to your doctor.
Right.
And absolutely don't take them unless they tell you to, because the overuse of them is also a very bad bad thing.
Yes. Yes. There's signs up in the doctor's office all the time about it's probably a virus, because you want because with a virus, typically with like a generic cold type virus,
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do in terms of a drug.
Antibiotics aren't effective against viruses.
Right.
Right. For the differences we already talked about.
Right. So you go to the doctor, you take the time off of work, you spend the copay, you wait in the doctor's office, you get in there and they're like, okay, it's a virus. There's nothing I can do. And you want that payoff. You're like, well, at least give me some antibiotics so I feel like my time was like worth it, right? Kind of a problem there with the human interaction.
Yep. So that's a little correction to our previous discussion. I'm sure there's tons of things that we can correct as we go along. We're not experts in anything really.
If we're aiming to get to episode 100, we could probably just spend the next 80 episodes correcting everything we got wrong in the first 20.
Exactly.
There's fruitful ground to cover there.
But I mean, that's the nature of conversation. So you're going to get things wrong.
Yes.
We're not doing lectures here. We're just having a chat.
Yes.
So to delve into another subject we don't really know much about, astrophysics.
Yes.
We talked about Tabi Star in a previous episode. This is a star that has the bizarro light fluctuation curve that's leaded some fanciful suggestions that it might have been evidence for an alien megastructure.
Yes, and so we had discussed the exciting possibility of that versus the more boring explanation that it's probably going to be, and it looks like the more boring explanation.
Right, the more boring explanation is usually always the explanation you eventually arrive at.
Right. In fact, I think maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but I think we were on the right track when we were postulating the boring explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've done some more follow-up observations from since the time that we first talked about it, and they saw that the dimming was more pronounced in the ultraviolet spectrum rather than infrared, which is more consistent with it being dust particles that are being the obscuring medium of the starlight rather than larger structures, because a larger structure would dim the light in all spectrums.
Yeah, basically a big dust cloud orbiting.
Yeah, some sort of dust cloud and debris.
Right.
In a very haphazard arrangement is causing these light fluctuations.
I mean, haphazard so far as we can tell. Maybe the intergalactic warning system set up these dust particles in exactly this configuration in order to send us a message to them.
Yeah, sure.
Warning us of the gamma ray burst. Right?
I'm sure we'll follow up this later with a correction.
I've had fun, by the way, telling some of my friends about gamma ray bursts.
Oh, goody.
Because, there really is not a lot to worry about in the world right now.
Oh, yeah. We've got it easy right now.
Yeah, both in the short term and the long term. Everything's pretty stable in terms of ecology and politics and all that. So just to fill the gap, I sort of wanted to share the threat of gamma ray bursts. So that's been well received in general. I like to spread the love like that. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Tabi Star, boring star.
It's not boring. It's still intensely interesting to study.
Yeah.
It's just it doesn't have the sci-fi explanation of a Dyson swarm. It is apparently off the table now. So.
Yeah. Until next time.
Until the next time we find some sort of bizarre signal from outer space.
A couple of other spacey type things.
Sure.
I don't know if you were following. So there apparently is increasing evidence for Planet 9.
Oh yeah. I meant to do some reading on that because I saw that.
Yeah. So if you grew up during our time, there used to be 9 planets, and then they kicked Pluto out of the club.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, there have been growing speculation that there is an additional very large planet way far out there.
Yeah, this is like 10 times the mass of Earth is what the estimate is, I believe.
Yeah, what they would call a super Earth. It's not a gas giant, but it's a very large rocky planet. Well, who knows what the terrain is, but essentially, if it's going to be that large and that far out there, it's going to cause some sort of gravitational impact on the other components of the solar system.
Right.
And so when you look at what does our current model not explain about the gravitational behavior of the various solar system components, and you look at, oh, well, this is a problem, they're saying, okay, if there was this Planet 9, it neatly explains 5 or 6 different problems that otherwise are not well explained. And so we don't have direct observation of it, but the inferential evidence of its gravitational impact seems to be growing increasingly strong.
Yeah, and they have a pretty good idea of what part of the sky it should be in. I mean, it's going to be really, really dim and way far out there in the solar system. So they're right now they're doing a very intense sky survey of the area in question to try to find any kind of object out there that's moving even slowly enough.
And they're talking like 20 times further out from the sun than like Neptune is.
Yeah, it's a long way out there.
Yeah. So there you go, another possible rock for humanity to hop onto.
Let's go.
Speaking of rock hoppers, I don't know if you saw Elon Musk's recent video about the progress they're making with their SpaceX business.
Yes, I did. I did watch that. The BFR.
So is the BFR the Earth to Mars rocket?
I think the BFR is their new design for their all-purpose large cargo carrying rocket.
Okay.
It's a rocket that it can launch into Earth orbit or it can go into further afield. It also can land on its own, like the first stage rockets they've been landing recently.
So basically, a much larger version of these self-landing rockets.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched this video. So obviously, traveling to Mars is exciting, but he was also talking about using it for city-to-city global transportation. So basically, instead of staying, at 30,000 feet or whatever the airplane does, you launch this rocket way up, and then you could essentially get from anywhere on the globe in, I think he's talking like 40 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you just go up and then you come down and then boom, there you are. Yeah, so he's not just about getting off the rock, but about getting around the rock more quickly. I thought that was pretty interesting.
It's an interesting plan. The interesting thing, I watched that presentation that he made at his speech he made at the International Astronomical Congress in Adelaide. And his presentation is, and the ideas in the presentation are very, very interesting. The thing that struck me about Elon Musk is what a terrible public speaker he is.
I noted that as well.
He's like one of the most famous people in the world and most successful people in the world, but he is as bad at public speaking as all the rest of us are,
So I'll combine that with another observation. So I don't know if you followed he did a Reddit AMA on the rocket as well. So I looked at the first few questions and responses, and somebody asked a very technical question about thrust. This is about most things you can say, oh, this isn't rocket. So this was rocket science. Okay. And someone asked him a very technical question. He gave this very technical, in-depth response that I could completely not understand. And somebody responded to that response saying, looks like I'm on the wrong thread. So it is funny. Like, obviously he's like a famous personality and all that, but like he really understands the geek level technical detail.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's, I've mentioned this before. It's kind of hard to tell what is going on with his personal motivations because obviously he has a big business interest in all this, but he certainly has a lot more authenticity in terms of his technical passion than your typical CEO does, right?
Yeah. It's actually, I find it very encouraging to see something like that as someone who doesn't speak very well in public, to see someone's that successful struggle with it as well.
Yeah,
it's kind of encouraging in a way.
Yeah, I think as well, because it's not like you can't understand what he's saying. It's just that he's not polished and like marketing like engaging. Like this is not a Steve Jobs iPhone reveal kind of.
Right. I mean, he's stammering, he's hesitating, he's losing his train of thought. He's repeating things that he's already said. All the stuff that I do all the time.
Right. And yet, because he's Elon Musk and he's talking about something so interesting, people are like, okay with it.
Yeah.
It's funny sometimes when I go to software development conferences, I'll see people speak from like some of the bigger tech companies, Facebook, Google, and all that, and they all have this kind of, I wouldn't say all, but most of them have this obviously trained way of speaking in which, okay, this is somebody who's a total geek who, as a developer is there because of what they can do with software, and yet they have this like way of presenting the slides and about talking and engaging that they've obviously been trained up to do it. And it doesn't interfere really all that much with understanding what they're saying, but it's a definite change from like what you might get from just having a cup of coffee with them in a shop or something, right? There's this layer of artificiality that has been imposed. That was interesting. You almost wish it was there wasn't that, so that you had more of that personal connection. But
it made me wonder whether someone like Elon Musk suffers from imposter syndrome, just like all the rest of us often do.
Yeah, like that is interesting. There are a lot of examples of very famous people who have very low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. For one reason or the other, right?
Yeah, and whatever personal issues or whatever. But yeah, there's an external perception that if you're successful, then by definition you have like extreme self-confidence.
Yeah, which is often not the case.
Right.
Especially with people in the creative fields, especially. It's very easy to look at other people's work and just despair at the quality of your own work.
Yes.
Which brings to mind a conversation that was what they were having at a different podcast that I've listened to.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
A shout out to the peeps at the A-Town podcast.
Yes.
Because they had said some nice things about us on one of their recent episodes.
Yes, they did, which you've responded to in a curious way, Tom. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about this. So first off, A-Town, excellent Two Dudes Talking podcast. They hail out of Missouri, is it?
Yep.
And so you get the cool vibe from a different part of geographical part of the U.S. So if you like this, if you like Hello Internet and all that kind of business, definitely check them out. Excellent water tower coverage. I've learned a lot about that. So yeah, they mentioned us in their podcast, and it was funny because they were talking about it in terms of like being envious at
I know, that was so weird.
Right, because you mentioned this podcast to me initially, and so before I heard that segment, I listened to one of their episodes, and my immediate reaction, the very first reaction I had when I listened to them was like, "Wow, they're really smooth."
Yeah, I know. It's like we're just a bunch of knuckleheads trying to compete in this space, and they're actually have really good chemistry and back and forth, and we struggle with that all the time.
I thought they're their presentation in terms of how they're like expressing themselves was really smooth. Like that's what I meant by smooth, and so it was doubly like weird because then one of the comments they had was oh yeah, and their word choice is really good. I can hardly get the next word out in terms of getting close to what I mean, and so
yeah,
it is fascinating how one's internal perception and the external perception of others is so different.
Yeah. So some of the backstory behind that. After they had recorded that episode, but before they had posted it, I had actually direct messaged Charlie on Twitter and saying how much I enjoyed their podcast because I have been listening to it a lot lately.
Right.
And we're both kind of complimenting each other at the same time, unaware that they'd just recorded an episode about that. So, that also brought to mind the imposter syndrome because, they're listening to us, and being envious, and I was doing the same thing, basically.
Right. So they mentioned as well that, like, in 2-Bit Geeks, they're so successful. I'm like, dude, like, Tom, what are you telling people when you interact with them on social media? I've trusted you to kind of manage the Twitter sphere, and I don't know what you going off the rails here on me, man, or you know some numbers I don't, or
no. It's all relative. We're all competing for the same 4 listeners, I think.
Thank you for listeners.
Anyway, I thought that was funny. So
yes,
a shout out to them.
Yes, shout out to them. Although it is a little difficult getting the instructions from Charlie's mother every couple of weeks about what we're going to talk about next. It's been a little bit of a restriction, but I'm willing to work with it. Okay, so all this like mutual admiration society, happiness, and then I'm looking at Twitter, and now they're our rival podcast. What's going on here, Tom? Like again,
we're just having a little playful banter on the Twitter. It's all in good fun.
All right, but perception is reality, right? So you have to like be careful about what you say. We don't want loyal 2-Bit Geek listeners, maliciously assaulting the infrastructure of A-Town.
No, it's just rising tide lifts all boats. So go listen to A-Town. Go listen to some other small audience podcast that needs listeners. Pay it forward.
There you go. Okay, so I can feel good about that. You're not
yes.
You're not out there throwing haymakers on the Twitter sphere?
No, you know me. Would I do that?
I don't know, man. This is like a new thing for you. So with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe you just sort of were invigorated with your own success, and
Well, we'll see how it progresses.
Okay. Yes. Kudos to A-Town. Good work. Keep on it.
Yep, absolutely.
Rock and roll.
Any more follow-up?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I went to a software development conference this past week.
Aha. Yes, we are a bit delayed in our current episode because we've both been traveling a bit. So it's been kind of hard to connect for a time to record until right now.
We have been bandying about the cosmos, as it were.
That's right. That's right. And you went to Orlando.
I did go to Orlando. Stayed right outside of Universal Studios. Did not step foot inside it. So first off, not my scene really.
Yeah.
Universal, and nothing against Universal. It's just I think we talked about roller coasters a little bit before, but I'm not a big ride person, and theme park itself. Plus, I was there by myself on a work trip, so it's like be a different scene if my wife and kids were there and we were all just hanging out on vacation.
Yeah.
But
this was for a software developers conference.
Yes,
Okay.
So it was like basically at the hotel. So it could have been in Indianapolis, New Jersey, and it would not have made much of a difference.
So what happens at a software developers conference? I have no idea. I don't know anything about software development.
Okay, well, so there, it varies depending on who's running it, but the basic structure is you're in a big room, big like conference room, and someone will give a keynote presentation about the topic. So this wasn't about Java, but say it's about Java development. They would get up there, and maybe you have somebody who is actively involved in evolving the language of Java up there, talks about the future of the Java language, right? And then maybe somebody else gets up and talks about this is the latest cool thing that you could do with applying it to web development, and here's this new API we're working on. And then typically you kind of break out into like little sessions, so you have more specific things, and you have different speakers will get up for, depending on the format, 20 to 40 to possibly 60 minutes or so, and give a little spiel about what they're doing. So it's learning about how people are using the thing that you're using in different creative ways, and also an educational opportunity. So it's not just, hey, look, I did this and I applied this. Isn't that interesting? It's, oh, you're still learning about this technology. There's a lot of things to learn about it. Let me give a little spiel and talk about this. And
okay.
So
it's basically the same as every other conference people would go to. It's just a different subject.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe I misunderstood your question a little bit, that you didn't understand what a conference was.
I'm imagining some super software development nerd nirvana kind of congregation that's only the masters of the trade will meet in secret.
No, not nearly as exclusive.
Okay.
I bet you though that there are those kinds of meetings. They just don't advertise them as
right. Okay.
As conferences.
Do you go to these kind of conferences often?
Like it's varied over the years. I try and get there once every couple of years or so.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it's good from a training perspective. If I'm working with some technology and I don't know a lot about it yet, to hear it talked about from people who do use it is educational. I think a lot of the benefit though is just getting out of the office. Even though half my office is my home office, just getting out of my normal environment, my normal day to day, and just focusing exclusively on learning something new.
Yeah.
Is very rejuvenating, very refreshing. To be able to kind of like pay attention to that in a free and comfortable, open way, and then kind of come back. It's kind of like in the same way that a vacation is supposed to leave you more rejuvenated and refreshed when you come back to work. It's kind of like a technical vacation from your daily work responsibility that you go out, get refreshed upon, and you sort of come back in a more renewed mindset.
So you find it valuable?
I do.
The PED seal of approval for conferences.
Yeah. Although, I mean, that being said, there are certainly conferences that do it better than others.
Yeah.
And it is funny. As you might expect, software developers are not the most extroverted, gregarious social creatures in the world. So it takes a little bit to get interactions going, and the subcultures vary a little bit from technology to technology. But like, when you're having lunch in the middle of these things, getting the conversation going and just talking about something, it's not like, it was I had a little bit of a podcast flashback actually. Well, I felt like occasionally I was sitting at a table with like 7 or 8 Toms, and I'm like, I'm just random.
Sorry.
I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. And then I was just, randomly interjecting topics of conversation to get people, to reflect on things.
We can be difficult sometimes. I apologize.
But I'm the software guy. Right?
Yeah.
You're the hardware guy?
Yeah.
After all these months, Tom, I still don't understand what it is that you do for work.
Sometimes I don't even know. I kind of see myself as I do IT support work.
Okay.
I support large faculty and staff for a university. So I kind of see myself as the kind of floating spare brain for whenever someone needs to figure out a problem, but they don't have the brain cycles to work on it. They just offload it to me, and I'll solve the problem for them, and then they can get back to work.
Do you find that fulfilling?
I do. I mean, I wouldn't want to do support in like a call center, that type of thing.
Right.
I do all my support in person, as well as managing lots of other larger tasks. But the day-to-day kind of end user support, I do enjoy that even after 20 years, just helping people solve problems and helping them do their work.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's other stuff part of the job too. I mean, just doing large software and hardware deployments and stuff like that. At previous jobs, I did a lot of network administration, server administration, that kind of stuff. But kind of got tired of that.
Yeah. So you like more the engaged problem solving aspect of it than the pure maintenance.
A good day is when you get a good puzzle at the beginning of the day and you can solve it by the end of the day and help someone get their work done. Right.
So that is one aspect of software development I really like in the way that I'm able to do it in my current environment, because so I get a lot of opportunity to engage one-on-one with the people that are actually using the stuff I'm developing, which is not always the case for a software developer.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be rare.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because I have like inward-facing applications on our intranet as opposed to releasing something into the wild and then never knowing who's using it, which is the case for a lot of software. But yeah, I guess there's the mode of you're sort of sitting in your cubicle for 10 hours a day and just chunking out code, and then you're only ever interacting with your screen. but I enjoy when somebody doesn't know how to do something with what I've developed, or there's a problem, and then I'm able to solve that for them. That's as fulfilling, solving a problem with something I've developed, than creating the software itself. That human interaction.
Yeah,
I like humans.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about IT support that you wouldn't necessarily guess, is that 90% of technology problems are actually people problems. It's just the end user's expectations and what they're trying to do is often the source of the issue rather than a malfunctioning piece of technology. So you have to kind of work with people to try to figure out what they're trying to do and the easiest path for them to get there.
Right. Do you find as well that very often there is even with very smart end users, there's this sort of psychological problem I find that people struggle to get over with, that if they're trying to do something with software or technology and it's not working, there's this like initial defensive anxiety of not wanting to appear stupid.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like, I tried to use your silly ordering system and I'm getting this error message. And so very often the interaction starts out as your stuff is broken. Or I tried XYZ and it's not. And so there's the natural frustration from you're losing time and you expected something to work. But I think there's this additional layer of, I should know how to do this, but it's not. And so I find dispelling that as soon as possible makes it a much more positive interaction.
Absolutely. Everyone has horror stories about terrible IT support people that have just made them feel awful and stupid about what their problem they've had. And that's something you absolutely have to avoid if you're dealing with people trying to help them, is to get past that almost right off the bat, that you're trying to figure out a problem together. You're not trying to lecture them or tell them what they're doing wrong.
Plus, I find that even if there's not a bug in the software, right? Even if the system is operating as expected, if somebody is trying to use something in a very common sense, natural way, and they're encountering a problem, then the problem isn't with them, it's with the user interface design. I find a lot of the way I think about software is in terms of user interface design. When I say user interface, like from the point of view of an end user, whether you're talking about whatever piece of technology, it's ultimately at the most abstract level a user interface. Like they're interfacing with the system at the point that a user does.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there's an incredible amount of support stuff behind the screen in the browser, there's all the JavaScript code. Behind that code, the stuff's going on the server. Behind the server, there's stuff going on in the database. And But to it, so this is a three-dimensional depth to the whole system, but they're only interacting with it right there. And so if you mess up on that last stage, it's like all the rest. It doesn't matter all the rest of the stuff. And there's have you explored the topic of user experience, UX?
I know the term. I don't know enough about it to be able to talk about it in length.
It's basically it's pretty simple. It's like it's thinking about software and software design from the perspective of how does a user engage with the system.
Yeah.
So a big subtopic is user interface design, but it's more about, I'm trying to solve a problem or I'm trying to get some value or benefit from something. And so you've created this enormous system that has all these supporting pieces, but I only ever interact with it at points X, Y, and Z. And so let's try and design, let's try to think about that first, because ultimately that's how I'm going to derive value. And I would say more than 10 years ago or so, this was not a mainstream notion. The idea of how you develop software was very much from the back end towards the end user.
Mm.
Okay, first you have to get like your network in place. Then you get your big database in place. And then you get your data providing programs in place. And then you deploy it all on a server. And then you finally at the end provide some way for your user to interact with this massive system that you've created.
if they're lucky.
Right, exactly. Or sort of UX design puts that in the beginning. And so you say, like, there's this concept of, this isn't necessarily a subtopic of UX, but it's related of user stories. And you say, okay, why are we developing the software in the first place? Tell me a story of the problem that you're encountering or the context that you're in that you want to improve. And so you like script out this user story and you say, oh, all right, what way to interface with our system would be most helpful for you in this story? And so you build it out from the opposite way on the way down, which to me is much more engaging because, again, it's coming from that problem solving mindset, right? It's like people aren't really asking you for a button to be placed on the screen at this particular pixel location. That's not really what they want. Like that, it's a means to an end towards achieving that. And I found with the most interesting problems I've ever worked on, it's not even possible for the end users to describe what they want in terms of what the user interface should be. Like they can tell me what the problem is. They can tell me what information is lacking and what they would like to see, but they can't like articulate that in a user interface for a software system.
Yeah, that makes sense. That mean that's not their job. They know what they want to do. They just don't know how to get there. That's your job to figure that out.
Exactly. And so you're almost like acting as a translator.
Yeah.
To a different language. Like, oh, I know how to talk in terms of buttons and drop downs and tabs and such. So how do I, and charts and whatever. So how do I translate how this data is being expressed that's going to be most helpful for you in this language, in the decision context that you have or what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it's the same thing what we do in desktop support, except in a different way.
Yeah, and I still think culturally there's such a disconnect between the programmer developer sort of systems mode of thinking versus the end user that there's still this sort of barriers to separating those roles. But I mean, obviously different companies and have different approaches to this and are more or less evolved on it than others. Every day I see examples of this, of how not thinking about it in terms of a means to an end is holding us back in terms of how we create things. And I don't mean just my own work. I mean in all sorts of things. We could talk about hand dryers for a long time, though.
Something I've been meaning to ask you for a while about software development. I've dabbled in programming, here and there for a long time. Never really seriously, though. But I mean, doing IT work, you do scripting for file operations and deployments and stuff like that. Basic kind of stuff. But I really don't have any in-depth knowledge about software development. So my question to you is, am I too old to get into it now?
No. No.
It seems like it's a young person's game.
So the advantage that young people have is that they're more open to learning things.
Yeah.
Typically.
Okay.
Right? And so I think the real question you have to ask yourself is your brain and your mind so fossilized into your manner of approaching things that it would be hard for you to think in a different paradigm? If it is, then I would say it would probably be hard for you. But I think that's really the only difference. I don't think there's anything biological about being in your 40s or 50s that makes it inherently harder to learn coding or software development.
Well, let me ask you this then. Maybe not the biological issue, but maybe the industry issue. IT in general, I think, has a age discrimination problem. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Am I too old to get into software development for that reason?
No. I would. So, yeah, there's an age discrimination, but the pressure I think that companies face is that if you're gonna hire somebody with no experience that you want to develop as an employee and be productive for you over the long haul, you're naturally going to go with somebody who's younger.
Right.
One is because they probably have lower salary requirements. You can pay them cheaper because they have no experience, and they're more likely to stay with you for a longer time. Although I'm gonna disagree with myself almost immediately because I think I think that paradigm has also changed as well. This idea that you hook up with a company when you're in your 20s and you stay with them for decades is
that's long gone.
Much less. I mean, it's not totally gone, but it's much less common than it used to be. There are enough specialized and new and emerging technologies that if you are able to perform those skills, there's certainly opportunities there. Like there's a huge skills gap in terms of the number of software / development jobs that are open in the US, for example, versus the number of people we have to fill those jobs.
Yeah.
In the same way that we have more blue collar manufacturing workers than we have jobs for them in the US, it's the opposite problem with the service industry.
Yeah.
And software development. But yeah, I think the other thing too with changing careers late is just that you don't have as much of a track record with doing that type of thing. You sort of get a free pass when you're right out of school that you have no experience with it. But if you've been doing something else, the examples of that happening are less, and so you're a higher risk to a company because are they just trying this out? You sort of have to prove yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how well I'm saying that.
So it's trickier than it seems at first.
Yeah, but you were kind of asking two questions at the same time, which I think was maybe the source of my confusion. One is there an employment problem in terms of just probability of job acquisition versus can you mentally perform that paradigm shift within yourself and learn something?
Yeah, I think I'm wondering what the answer is to both those questions.
Yeah. The latter question about mental paradigm shift, I think you've already demonstrated, Tom. I mean, you like learning new things.
Yes, I do. I think I'm okay in that aspect.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty easy these days to get your feet wet and just a taste of what coding and software development is to the point where you can kind of say, oh, is this interesting, intriguing enough that I want to pursue it further? You don't have to go to school for 4 years in order to get a idea for what it is to do coding and software development, I don't think. But there's a lot of depth to it though.
Okay.
Are you thinking of changing careers? Is that what you're asking? Are we switching to a career advice podcast?
I'm just wondering, I think about it all the time. Oh, not all. I think about it often that, that's probably something I would enjoy. I think I would have some aptitude at it, but I'm just wondering if I've waited too long to get into it. Whether 20 years doing IT support I'm basically stuck on a track that's going one direction and I can't switch tracks.
Yeah. I don't think so. So there's a couple other things too, like a lot of, at least with web development, a lot of the code is open source. A lot of the platforms are open source. And if you've ever been on GitHub, Tom?
I know what it is. I haven't used it though.
All right. Basically a platform for open source project code sharing and collaboration.
Right.
So it's very easy for anybody to make a contribution to these projects, even like really big ones. From the most simple thing of improving the documentation to there's always open issues. Issues meaning a polite euphemism for bugs.
Right.
And for very large projects, even the ones that are right on top of it have lots of bugs, just because that's the nature of software. And so if you investigate these, you found a fix for it, and you submit a fix to it, and so you could contribute that way, or somebody wants some minor feature, and you say, oh, you know what, here's a way to do it, and you contribute in that, or you can contribute to helping people learn the technology as you're learning it. So you can start to establish a track record of knowledge and work, even without being employed in it. And that's an increasingly common way for people to establish a bit of experience with it. Like that would show up on your resume. Like, oh, I contributed to these open source projects or all that. But there's a lot of free self-learning resources online as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sure of that. Yeah.
It's the evolution of these technologies happening so fast now that even if you focus on one area, like one development, like the just web development itself has so many different threads that if you become competent in understanding just one little component of that, well, then you're valuable in your organization, right? So then you can leverage that for your own benefit. As we continue on the Job Advice podcast.
Yeah, I did some little bit of web development here and there back in the 90s when it was possible to keep all that in your brain at the same time. But now it seems like it's so specialized, all the different layers to it now you can't do it all. It seems like to me anymore. You have to specialize on one particular part of web development.
Yeah, like so. Within the last few years, again, once people started agreeing on standards and evolving things in a more consistent way. Mm. So like JavaScript being like the main programming language in the browser, has kind of become like assembly language, or that's how it's evolving. You can still write pure JavaScript directly and deploy it right to the browser, but if you're doing anything involved or complex, application-y kind of behavior, sophisticated kind of stuff, then the first thing you're doing is instead of saying, okay, do these 20 things in sequence, these 20 instructions, you call a function in a library, which is basically like, if you're not familiar with functions and libraries in programming, it's basically an abstraction. Yeah. So instead of saying, here's the 500 instructions to build a car, you call the car function and you pass it in some parameters, some values, and say, oh, I want 4 wheels, I want a 2016 Honda, yada yada, and that one line of code will then create is a replacement for those low level instructions, right?
There's these frameworks for everything now, isn't there?
Exactly. So that's just a function, but then you can imagine multiple functions within a context being helpful, and so the next layer of abstraction is a library of functions. And so, not to get too wonky, but jQuery was the really big first library in JavaScript, which was kind of a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Where no matter what you were doing, it was easy just to say import jQuery, and then jQuery all of a sudden gives you this library of functions where you can just call them, and all these lower level instructions are abstracted for you, and it makes it much easier than doing all the instructions, one by one. And then as that evolved, other libraries evolved. And so you had jQuery, and then you had this other library for, say, all of your fancy user interface components. You had this other library for your data access level. You had this other library for accessing other components on the browser. And so that kind of evolved. And then as the years went on, a way to tie all these different libraries together in a cohesive way where you didn't have to cobble this flavor library from that flavor library from that flavor, that evolved. And so then you have an application framework. So now you're not even calling a function within a library, you're calling some framework command, which then calls the functions in the library, which then calls the instructions in JavaScript, which also ultimately too, so when you write a line of JavaScript code, all you're doing is sending a message to the browser, and all the browser is on, say, a Windows machine is a C program that's running on an operating system, and all that operating system is a very large program that's running on the machine, right? And machine language instructions. All those machine language instructions are doing at the end of the day is flipping bits, binary up and down, and all that binary code is doing is modulating the electrical frequency of the transistor at the lowest level.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a continued abstraction from the very lowest binary layer all the way up.
Yeah.
And it just keeps abstracting.
The layer of abstractions there is mind-boggling once you look at it all.
Totally.
It's a wonder sometimes that it even all works.
Yes.
And that you can develop for it.
No. But essentially, so there's a double-edged sword to abstraction in the creation of software, which is you get developer velocity, which is instead of having to type in 1,000 instructions, you make 3 function calls. And so what before took you an hour and is now taking you 20 seconds. And so wonderful. But you lose control. So by its very nature, an abstraction is pre-baking things for you, but it's limiting your ability to fully customize that, right? And so there's always this back and forth at every abstraction layer, and every time that we add a new layer of abstraction on the top, so what are we gaining and what are we losing? And then how do we make the window into that library the most useful, give it the most options without losing the value of the abstraction, right? So if you think back to that car function, if all you had was a variable to pass in the number of wheels and the make and the model and the year and the paint color, well, you can very quickly create a fleet of cars, but you're not really customizing them to that low of a level, right? You have a limited amount of control. So okay, but so what if you added 17 more options on that function call, where you could specify 17 different things about that car? Now you have a lot more control, but now you have a function that has 21. It becomes unwieldy, right? Now you're expending all this brain power. The benefit you get from the abstraction is now self-defeated by the complexity of the API. And so you don't want to function with one variable. And so what is that? And so how do you evolve that? And when do you split out that library into a different library and those multiple libraries into a different platform? And so how you structure that in the most balanced way is a core and continued problem of software development.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I hesitate to think it's a possibility to get into software development at this point. Because I mean, when I first learned programming back in grade school, that's a hell of a lot different than it is now.
True. However, yeah, so like what I've described sounds pretty involved and complex. However, like this two optimistic thoughts that I could maybe leave you with. One is, so when I go back into an application that I've worked on for 10 years and that has a lot of different moving parts and that has evolved over time to use different libraries and different functions, and I get a request to say, oh, could you add this feature to this component or whatever? And I go back into the code. I'm looking at the code and I can't, 9 times out of 10, my initial take on it is that I don't understand what's going on. And it's not because the code is terrible, although I certainly, am not without the ability to write terrible code. But you just lose the context.
Right.
And so it takes me a little while to reboot the context in my mind of what was going on here until I say, oh, okay, that was this context. And so then I start to work in this context. And while I'm working in this context, I've completely lost awareness of the context of the other parts of the application and those other layers, endless layers of abstraction that we talked about. And while I'm doing the one thing that I'm doing for this particular part, that's all I'm thinking about. And that's all you need to think about. So even though if you were to like diagram the entire thing, not just an application, but all the tools available to you, all the different ways that you can program, all the layers of abstraction, all the different libraries and tools and blah, blah, blah. Even if you drew that out, it would be a ridiculously complex system that nobody could possibly understand. In terms of practically building things, all you really need to do is understand the context of what's in front of you. And if you have the ability to do that, then you're good. And I guess the second most optimistic thing I would say is, even if you had the ability to understand all of those moving parts and all those possibilities, it wouldn't do you much good next week because this stuff is evolving ridiculously fast.
Yep.
JavaScript development is one thread of programming. It's a pretty big thread, but it's just one thread. And even within the world of JavaScript, there are 10 different threads of ways to do it. And even if within each of those threads, there's 10 different ways to approach that particular flavor. And there's even the smartest, hippest Google, Facebook, Amazon, whatever developers can't keep most of that in their head, right? And so it's less about knowing specifically, oh, I know this particular framework or this library or this tool or whatever. It's about the ability to constantly adapt to those ever-changing things, and then at some point be able to hone down on one specific expression of it and say, oh, I want to write an application with these libraries or these functions, and I know them to a degree that I can solve this problem, and I've solved it, and then you move on to the next one. So there's maybe it does sort of it is sort of conducive to your desire to like be constantly learning things, because there's certainly no lacking for that.
Okay, interesting. I'm sure this is a topic we'll revisit at some point.
Rockin'.
Mm-hmm. So you're back from Orlando.
Yes.
Back home again. That's why we're recording. I was away as well. I was in Ireland for about a week and a half.
Yeah, 10 days. That's a nice little jaunt.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I would have preferred a little longer, but that's all I had time for at the moment.
Right.
So I was kind of off the grid for a little bit. So that's why we were a bit delayed on our podcast schedule.
Did you enjoy your off-gridness?
I did. Yeah, I was in rural West Kerry, so it was really out in the country of Ireland. So,
rural, like on the coast?
Yeah, on the coast, right west of Dingle. If anyone's familiar where that is.
Did you go cliff jumping?
No, I did not.
Swimming?
No.
Is that like a thing in Ireland, or is it too cold?
It's a thing, and it's also too cold. It is very cold,
right?
Especially in the off season. But it was a nice break to get away.
You posted a couple of pictures on social media. It's like nice little sort of misty fog over the rolling hills.
Yeah, we had
vibe.
We had the typical Irish weather. It was a little bit of everything over the course of every day.
Right.
Some rain, some sun, all mixed in together. So it was nice.
A relaxing vibe for you?
Yeah. It's always relaxed. I go fairly frequently, as you probably know. At least once a year. We have some family-owned property there, so I'm always over there all the time, and I have been for almost my entire life. So
you're a kind of a second citizen over there.
Kind of, but not officially.
Right.
They would kick me out eventually if I tried to stay.
How do you like the food there? I'm trying to think of big differences between U.S. and Ireland, and I would imagine the food is a notable difference.
It's different. I hear tell that the seafood in Dingle is fantastic, but the problem is I don't eat seafood, so I don't really know.
Huh? Are you allergic?
No. I just despise the taste of seafood. It makes me ill. It's not an allergy. It's just a revulsion.
Really?
Yeah. It's always been the case.
Since your childhood?
Yeah, always. It's just the smell of it just makes me retch. So I just avoid it at all costs.
All right, then.
Yeah,
I also don't eat fish, but that's for vegetarian reasons. So,
right.
All right. Well, I will cancel the big fish cookout that I had planned for the two of us now. Yeah, so you enjoyed your time over in West Kerry?
Yep. It was actually where we were situated is very near where last year they did a lot of location shooting for episode 8.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you partake of any Jedi training in the temple? Or did they let you read the Journal of the Wills while you're there? Or they keep that to the not a public document?
No, there was actually, I went by the place, or I took a look at the place where they had done the filming, which is up on a headland up by the coast. Place called Civil Head, or is it in Irish? It's Concheval, roughly. But all trace of their presence was completely removed. When I was there last year, that the sets were there, still set up there. I wasn't there when they were shooting, but I was there just before and a little bit afterwards, and they had all their sets built up there still. They had a bunch of the stone huts of the Jedi Temple built up on top of a cliff.
Ooh, stone huts.
Yeah. So what they're trying to do is recreate the actual real monastery that's on the Skellig Michael Island, that's off the coast of Kerry, which is where they did the scenes in the end of episode 7, where Rey climbs the steps on that rocky island and finds Luke Skywalker at the top. that's a very remote island that's off the coast of Kerry to the south of where we are. But for the couple weeks of shooting they did for episode 8, they did it on the mainland, for logistical reasons, and they tried to recreate the scenery of that remote island on the mainland, which they did in Ballyferder, which is just like a 5-minute drive away from where we're staying.
Wow. I wonder if that area of Ireland will become overrun with tourists in the future.
Well, it's already overrun with tourists. It's just going to add more to it. Yeah, but I've in the past I've been up onto that headland before, just doing hiking. It's got a great view of the Blasket Islands up there, so it's going to be a nice spot, I think, in the movie. I've been up there. I've also been out to the Skellig Michael Island too in the past. I've actually stood in that spot where Luke Skywalker was on that island.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a really cool place. That island. It's very difficult to get to, but it's totally worth it. It's one of the most amazing places you can go in Ireland.
Wow, I would imagine it will become a tourist destination.
Yeah. They were taking advantage of it this past tourist season, as far as a lot more people going out there, I think. But they have to limit the number of people they go there every day because of the potential ecological damage to the island. So they have a set number of boats that can go out there every day, and a set number of tourists that can get there. So there's a long waiting list now for the boat rides.
Well, it's not easy to find the original Jedi temple in this vast galaxy. So I suppose if you have the opportunity to visit it, you want to do that. Have you seen the last trailer for episode 8?
I did, yeah.
What'd you think of that, Tom?
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I liked Looper, which is the film that Rian Johnson did before, a science fiction film. So I think he's probably do a good job. But again, you never know. So I'm cautiously optimistic, as we try to be with all the Star Wars movies.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of the themes that were teased in the trailer? I don't know if we want to get into slightly speculative spoiler territory or not.
I'm content to wait and see what happens. I mean, trailers are notoriously deceptive sometimes.
Yeah, they're definitely conscious of expectations and of playing with expectations. I would say. I definitely clicked through a few videos of Star Wars theories breaking down the analysis of the trailer, which is always fun.
So by the time I get back to Ireland again, this episode 8 will have been released. So I'm kind of worried about what kind of increase in Star Wars nerds are going to have on the Dingle Peninsula.
Right. Well, you got to get started painting those "May the Force be with you" parking here $30 signs.
That's right. There's already a few signs here and there. There certainly was some signs in Ballyferder for the home of Star Wars and all that.
It's been a huge boon to New Zealand with the Lord of the Rings business.
Right.
So not without precedent.
Yeah. So that was a pleasant break, but back in the U.S. again, back into the grind.
Wah, wah, wah.
On the way back from Ireland, I had something happen that I hadn't had happen before.
Did you sit behind John Malkovich?
I did not sit behind John Malkovich. I was in the back.
Okay.
I was back to my normal seat in the back of the plane.
All right.
But I got the dreaded 4 S's on my boarding pass when I was leaving from Shannon Airport to come back to Boston.
I have no idea what that means.
I didn't know what this means either, but it stands for Secondary Security Screening Selection.
Ooh.
I was randomly, I'm putting this in air quotes, randomly selected for additional screening going through the security screening at Shannon Airport.
What when you were getting onto the plane?
Before I got on the plane, right.
Okay. You say randomly in air quotes, you think you were singled out.
Yeah, I mean, because when I got my boarding pass printed, it was already, the little four-letter code SSSS was on there already.
Oh, okay.
So that was the selection process.
But maybe the printing of the SSSS is random.
From what I've been able to gather, researching it afterwards, I don't think it's
okay.
too random. It's usually caused by some sort of red flag that's raised.
Right.
And in my instance, I'm pretty sure what it was. The flights I had, the tickets I had, were actually originally purchased by a different family member, but they couldn't use them. So I had it both change the dates on them and change the names on the flights.
Oh.
So that's probably a red flag that's good enough to get you randomly selected for additional screening.
Right. you're a pretty suspicious looking guy to begin with.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously the beard is obviously another reason to
Yes.
get randomly selected too. But
Absolutely.
But so I was pulled out of line and had to go to an additional screening all by myself with a different security officer, apart from everyone else.
A personalized experience.
Yes, it was like the executive treatment.
Did you have a little cup of like warmed nuts or something? Or?
No. but
sparkling water? Or?
No, but it was an Irish gentleman, so it wasn't the humorless TSA drones that we have in the US. So it was a fairly reasonable experience. But
right.
they go through everything though. Everything had to come out of my bag, and I had to go through both the metal detector and the junk scanner, the full body scan.
Right.
They did the swabs over everything on my bag, my shoes, my socks, my hands, all my stuff. The guy was a bit suspicious when I didn't have a cell phone. He was a bit surprised by that. But I was like, sorry, right. I don't have one. I have an iPad, but I don't have a cell phone. I thought that was a little weird.
Yeah.
But I'm my concern now, I'm wondering if now I'm on some list now that every time I fly, I'm going to get this treatment. So next time I travel somewhere, I'll be looking to see if I get this 4 S's on my boarding pass.
Well, I assume podcasters get a little bit of extra scrutiny, so that probably adds to your profile. So when they were, so this is a family podcast, Tom, so you can feel free to not answer this question, but when they were scanning your person, how invasive was that search?
Well, they put you through the full body scans that are at all the major airports now.
Right.
So that's already pretty intrusive. But I also got the full pat down as well after that as well.
Oh, okay.
I had everything done.
Wow. Well, there you go. So how do you feel about that in general? People have some pretty strong opinions about, okay, well, this is, it's good for general safety and you're sort of making a sacrifice versus this is the state, invading personal privacy and dehumanizing you and just getting you used to the fact of constant surveillance and control that you have nothing to call back on.
Yeah, I mean, without getting too political, I'm fairly sympathetic with the idea that this is all security theater.
Yeah.
It's not really doing anything other than making people feel better.
Right.
At the cost of, a pretty serious invasion of privacy.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to evaluate because if I was in the security industry and I was sincerely trying to keep things safe, I wouldn't be that public with which mechanisms were really effective and which weren't.
Mm-hmm. Right?
It's like if you found a particular protocol that was very effective, you wouldn't say, "Hey, this is our most effective protocol," because then that would be instantly targeted and exploited. So it's not like they produce data that's publicly verifiable in terms of this practice versus that practice, and a lot of it seems to be reactive. Like the take your shoes off thing. Mm-hmm. That was because of an aborted attack that someone tried with their shoe.
One doofus tried to light his shoes on fire, and now we have to take our shoes off for 15 years afterwards.
Right. So you sort of question that, and that it obviously relates to government trust and all that.
Yeah.
And I think as the decades evolve, we won't have to worry about it too much in terms of it being physically invasive. It's going to get pretty easy pretty soon, I think, to with the way facial recognition software is rapidly evolving and iris scan software and the absolute loss of any private data. I mean, how many data breaches can there be right? Before we just assume that everybody's personal data is public?
Yeah. I didn't have a cell phone with me, but I had my iPad. But they didn't go into my iPad, though, which was the one thing I was surprised about. They went through everything else, but they didn't even open up my iPad. But the one thing I always do anyway, or at least I have recently, is that before I go through these checkpoints, I just remove everything like my email and my social media accounts off any devices I have. And since I use complex passwords that I can't remember anyway, I can truthfully say, I don't know what my password is. It's not on here. There's no way they can access it,
Yeah, I can understand that level of protection. I don't have the level of effort and discipline to. Do you use a password manager?
I don't.
So how do you keep track of what the password is?
I have a secret method that I'm not going to divulge.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Yeah. But obviously, the most important thing for people to do is not reuse passwords. So you have to use a different password for every single service. Obviously, with so many things that we access these days, that's quite a lot. So you have to have some form of password management, whether that just be writing these things down and put them in a safe place, or using a dedicated software service for that. But
Right.
as long as you're not reusing the same password and you keep it relatively complex, you're already ahead of the game for most people, I think.
Yeah. And by complex, we mean long, right? Not humanly obfuscated, as has been the suggestion for many years.
Yeah. Yep.
There's an XKCD for that.
Right. Exactly. I use the XKCD 4 random words method.
Correct horse battery staple.
But not correct horse battery staple. Something different. Don't try that.
No, don't use that one.
But overall, I mean, I was in good humor about it and cooperated as best as I could. And so it wasn't an overly unpleasant situation. And I got to skip the queue, and I actually got through the security screening before my wife did. So
there you go.
Bonus there.
Rockin'. Maybe you should volunteer for it in the future.
Well, I'm just wondering whether I'm already volunteered for it for a foreseeable future.
Right.
Now that I've on this list.
Sad for you, Tom.
Yeah. But even after I went through the screening, once I got to the gate to actually go into the airplane, I got flagged again there because the little alarm goes off when they scan your boarding pass if you have that code on it. So they have to go back and check in with security to make sure that they did the security assessment that says is needed for my getting on the airplane. So that was a delay there as well, getting on the plane.
Oh.
But after that, everything was smooth sailing.
That's good. Getting back into the U.S. was not a problem. They, from what I've heard, that's kind of an issue, but not so much for U.S. citizens.
Well, Shannon is kind of unique. Shannon Airport in Ireland, because you go through U.S. Customs in Ireland before you even get onto the plane.
Oh, that's convenient.
So when you get to Boston, for example, you just get off the plane in Terminal C and just go get your luggage. There's no screening on that end. They do everything in Ireland, I guess, because of the number of people that are going back and forth between Ireland and Boston is pretty significant. So they do that screening in Ireland before you even get on the plane.
Nice.
So that was my travel experience.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, welcome back, Tom. We all missed you.
Well, yeah. We'll see if we can crank out some podcasts now.
Yeah, right. We should record every day for a month.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know how these people do. I mean, those guys at the A-Town podcast, they put up episodes every week. I don't know how that's possible.
I was just about to say, man, we are absolutely cream crackered in terms of quantity there.
Yes.
Like, wow.
2 to 3 weeks is about, I can't even imagine having a more frequent release schedule than that.
Well, that's the whole perception exception thing.
Yep.
We have such a low signal to noise ratio that it takes us a number of records in order to like fill out a reasonable timestamp.
Yep. Editing fixes a lot of sins.
Yes. Be cool if you could do that in real life.
Oh, jeez, yeah.
That'd actually be kind of cool if you could spend a day, just a typical ordinary day, right? Go through your life and then be able to see it in rewind, and be able to edit out little parts and correct.
I'd love to be able to scroll back through my timeline and make a few choice edits here and there. But wouldn't everyone, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Got something to tell us about the podcast? Come join the discussion on the 2-Bit Geeks subreddit. We have a discussion thread for every new episode. You'll find the link in the show notes.